Hello, I'm Lauren Goodrich, and I'm joined today via Skype by Rebecca Keller, whom I've been discussing an alarming milestone that Russia has reached at the start of the year, where Russia has now confirmed that they have 1 million HIV or AIDS positive cases inside the country. Becca, can you tell us how this really compares with the rest of the world?
What's alarming about Russia compared to the rest of the world is the number of new cases. The fact that Russia's cases are increasing, they're on the rise. That's not the trend we see globally. Since 2000, we've seen a 35% reduction in new cases globally. Sub-Saharan Africa, East Asia, those regions are seeing reductions in new cases. It's the Russian, the former Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East. Those are the two regions where we're seeing increases in new cases. So what I'm curious about is why is Russia seeing this surge in cases recently?
Well, there's quite a few reasons for Russia. To start with, the AIDS population inside of Russia is changing. It's been 87% transmitted cases via injectable drugs over the past 30 years, and that's changing quite a bit. But the reason why that drug population is so important is because the Russian government itself has banned methadone as a treatment to get Russians off of drugs. And so because of that, there is really no way to really treat the drug population, which has really fostered this HIV spread over the past 3 decades.
Okay, yeah, that's in contrast where we see preventative measures being really crucial to the control or the slowing down of new HIV cases. Treatments like the antiretroviral treatments, those lower the number of deaths caused to AIDS, but it's really the preventative measures and the education of the population as to how transmission happens that brings down the number of new cases. And it sounds like Russia just isn't doing that.
No, they're not doing that. And then there's also a shift taking place in how HIV and AIDS is being spread inside of Russia, in which in just the past few years, we've seen a change from it being injectable drug users to being sexually transmitted new cases, to where it's almost half and half now, which is a very large change in a very short period of time inside the country. But as you said, a lot of this has to do with the fact that there really isn't a lot of education taking place inside of Russia. This is mainly because of the laws that went into place in 2012, in which Putin banned a lot of NGOs from operating inside the country. And those NGOs in 2012 that decided to stay had to register as foreign agents. And that's something a lot of the AIDS educational and HIV educational programs like UNAIDS decided that they just could not operate any longer inside of Russia. And so they left.
And can the Russian government do anything about it? I know globally we're looking at, almost a 50-50 split between funding coming from, especially in the developing world, funding coming from domestic government programs, as well as a really huge NGO impact. So without the NGO help coming in, how will Russia cope with this?
Well, the Russian government claimed that it was going to step up and actually start funding their own NGOs to help with educational and treating the HIV population. However, the problem is that it's tiny amounts of funding coming from the Kremlin. I mean, even below the $1 billion mark. And when you think the United States spends tens of billions of dollars, it shows that the Russian government is all talk about this, but they're not actually doing anything on the ground. And a good part of that is that they simply don't have the money right now. Russia's in its second recession within the last few years, and the government is cutting spending left and right. And so there just really isn't a priority for these NGOs inside the country. And then there isn't a priority geopolitically to allow the foreign NGOs to come back in, because Russia's so worried about foreign agent penetration that could lead to other things such as stirring color revolutions or protests. So because of this, the Russian AIDS Foundation believes that the country is going to instead continue to see this rapid spread of HIV in the country and even reach the 2 million person mark by 2020 is the estimate. So within the next 4 years. And this is really interesting to see how it's changing regionally as well, and that typically the HIV cases are concentrated within 10 main regions inside of Russia out of their total 83 regions. But this is changing. It's starting to spread across the country, which is another concern for the Kremlin itself.
Well, that can't be helpful economic, because HIV and AIDS typically infects the working age population. And if you're looking at an increasing number of individuals who are unable to work because of the disease and the lack of treatment for the disease, that's going to compound problems we've already seen. Drug-resistant TB is a huge problem in Russia, especially in terms of the cost of treatment. And the HIV and AIDS population is incredibly susceptible to that, secondary disease. So compounding that, I'm pretty sure Russia also has, additional demographic issues on top of that. So how does this play into their ongoing demographic constraints?
Well, overall, over the next 10 years, we're going to be seeing a massive demographic change in Russia. Russia's not going to look the same way it has over the past few decades, in the decade to come. So we have this HIV trend, we have the TB trend, we have a trend of ethnic Russians declining in population of 10% by 2030. We have also a shift in the makeup of Russia itself, in which the Muslim population inside of Russia is skyrocketing as the ethnic Russian population is in decline. And then also take into account that we're having a generational change take place inside of Russia, in which those Russians that were born after the fall of the Soviet Union are starting to come into adulthood and are also starting to come into this workforce that you mentioned earlier. And so overall, we're going to see a very different Russia in the decade to come, which could lead to everything from problems economically because of the decline in the workforce, problems socially as the government is not supporting the medical needs of the Russian people. And this could also impact the support of the Russian people for the current regime. So thank you so much, Becca. I really appreciate you taking time to speak with me on this. For more information, go to stratfor.com.